Welcome to Rapid Retro, a career-focused shortcast with an agile twist from Agile People Ops. Through this series, we're going to get a glimpse into the careers of leaders, founders and specialists from across the globe, using an old faithful retrospective as a backdrop for our conversations, loved, lacked and longed for. Hello there, welcome Sherry Bevan to the Rapid Retrocast. I'm so glad to have you on and sort of reconnect after our last conversation when I was invited to the Macmillan community of practice a couple of months ago. So thank you very much for that as well. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and give a flavour of your background and all the great work that you've been doing.
Really lovely. Well, thank you so much, Roxanne. I'm super excited to be here. And it seems like ages ago that you came along and talked to our Agile Pirates team. And I always remember that particular one because I had a nightmare with my laptop that day, and one of my colleagues stepped in at the last second to host the event. So I still remember that. So just to tell you a bit more about me, I'm a team performance and team development coach. I work as a freelance, but at the time that you mentioned, I was working on a fixed term contract at Macmillan Cancer Support. So I specialise in helping charities to develop their teams and to get higher performing teams that are more collaborative, more creative, more innovative. And of course, that very often means adopting and embedding agile ways of working, but particularly in the non-IT teams, so people development teams, HR, learning and development, which kind of feels almost backwards because my background is in technology, but I don't get involved with agile in the technology teams because they do it in a different way.
Oh. Hopefully as we go through the retro, we'll be able to sort of pick out how you managed to get across from that kind of tech space over into that non agile space. So we'll jump in then. So we'll start with the first segment being loved. So what has been your proudest achievement? What have you loved about your career this far?
Oh gosh, there's so much I've loved about my career because I've loved my career. I guess for me, the most recent achievement that has really made me feel proud is the work that I did at Macmillan, which I was there on, it turned out to be an 18-month contract. It was originally 12 months covering someone on secondment. But I got really quite closely involved with introducing agile ways of working while I was there. But the project that still makes me smile and still gives me that like warm fuzzy feeling in my tummy is I was working on a project to help Macmillan develop their new strategy. And if they wanted to go down the route of using open strategy, which effectively is crowdsourcing your strategy. So we brought together multidisciplinary teams from across the organisation. Each one of these teams we called them a task force. They were given a general theme or a question to ponder. For example, how might we reimagine Macmillan in the future, or how might we raise income in a different way? And then they went off. They worked together for 3 months, and they came back with different pieces of the question that they were looking at, and then it got pulled together by the strategy team. But my role was in setting up these task forces. There were 13 of them. At the start, we worked with an external consultancy to get us going in the first place, because a lot of this was very much about doing innovation work. And then so we had 13 task forces working in waves. So wave one was 3 task forces. So I started off as coaching one of those task forces, but then this was a project that was incredibly busy and incredibly difficult to manage at times because we had constantly shifting goalposts. I'm sure we've all had one of those projects where you think you're starting in July and then it turns out, oh no, actually we've changed our minds, we're starting next week, and you think, how am I going to do that? So I didn't actually end up coaching this particular task force very much because the dates changed and I was away. So I gave that over to someone else. Then we set up another 10 task forces where we basically did that ourselves. So we stopped using the innovation agency, and my role was to coach the coaches and train them in how to be an agile coach, and train the task force leads and all of the task force members how to use agile ways of working. So it was quite a daunting project, to be honest, because at the beginning I didn't know, I don't know if I can do this, but let's give it a go. I was stepping out my comfort zone like every day. And constantly thinking, oh, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if I know what I'm doing. I don't know if anybody else thinks that I'm doing the right thing. It was quite challenging in that way. Um, but it was incredibly successful. And that's why I'm so incredibly proud of that work, because I honestly felt like I didn't know what I was doing half the time. But I then got nominated for Employee of the Year, and won an award for With Ambition, which is like one of the values at Macmillan. And I've had so much amazing feedback from people that I started to realise, actually I do know what I'm doing, and people do like what I'm doing. But it was just a mind-blowing project because it was so big, so challenging, so fast. Um, but it also allowed me to use all the skills and do all the things that I love doing, like bringing people together, like building high performing teams, getting people to bring their whole, I know it's kind of a cliche now about bringing your whole self to work, but, bringing people so that they could feel safe to be who they really are, and to question things and to look at things in a different way. So it was, that was my proudest achievement and what I've loved about my career. But I mean, my career generally, I've worked in technology most of my working life, um, and then got made redundant in 2009. Found another job working for an outsourcing company, still working in technology, and was there for about 4 years. And after a while, I had young children at the time, and I just thought, I just cannot. It was so, that particular role was so inflexible that I decided to run my own business and get started. I actually didn't know what I was going to do at first, but I just thought, I can't. It's very difficult to have that flexibility to be able to go to the Christmas Carol service at school, or to go to the Harvest Festival. I wanted to be a mum who could be available, although I worked in technology and it was quite a hard role. But the particular company I worked for at the time didn't have any flexibility, so I set up on my own. But I didn't actually know what I was going to do to start off, and I just wrote to all of my contacts. I worked in legal technology, so it's quite a niche sector, and just wrote to everyone and said, hey, I'm setting up on my own. What can I offer you? These are the services. And I just listed out some of the things that I thought I could do, like learning and development, coaching, and service delivery. And then the first two firms that came back to me said, oh, yes, can we have some team coaching, please? And that's literally how I got started. And then since then, I've been working freelance and worked on a couple of contracts at Macmillan, and worked with a few other charities and organisations. And so that's how my career, I mean, that's how I switched from technology to doing what I do now. Not really, it wasn't like a conscious decision, it just happened. But I feel now like I've got the perfect setup, in that I get to work with teams, I get to work with a lot of charities, I get to bring people together, I get to do. I mean, I love helping people to learn and to grow and develop, and I think agile ways of working is just one of those amazing ways that people get to do that, because you're bringing people together in non-hierarchical teams. You're helping people to let go of getting things perfect before they roll it out, getting used to iteration and minimum viable products and all of that kind of stuff. And I think it's such a huge personal growth opportunity if you can introduce that way of working into people. So I feel like I've got like the dream job right now, quite honestly.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Um, I'm just picking up on some of the things that you said there. It sounds like it was quite an organic kind of journey towards, getting to where you are at the moment. And I'd not heard of the term open strategy. It's something I will look into actually, and that kind of crowdsourcing. Yeah, it's really interesting. Um, and almost using maybe like a hackathon, but maybe elongated. Is that right?
Yes. I think I've never actually done a hackathon myself, but I think yes, it's something like that. And I know that other organisations that have done open strategy. I think Nokia is one that's mentioned in the book. Can't remember the author of the book, and um, I'm living in Spain temporarily at the moment, so I don't have my bookshelf to hand, so I can't reach out and grab the book for you. But yeah, it's basically it's crowdsourcing your strategy. And so what's the advantages and the benefits of that is that because everyone's been involved in helping to develop that new strategy, it means that everybody's bought into the new strategy when it comes to implementation phase. So it's a really powerful way and quite innovative, I think, for a charity to decide that this is how they're going to develop their new strategy. I don't know of any other charities that have done it this way, but it's one of the key things for us at Macmillan was to use these agile ways of working to do it, and to work in sprints, and to run demos and retros and all of that kind of thing. And that really helped because we were bringing people together who'd not worked together before, who didn't know each other. It helped them to really bond as a really close-knit, strong, collaborative team very quickly. And I think that's one of the big advantages of an agile way of working is that, and of course it depends somewhat on the coach and the facilitator. And we definitely noticed some coaches were much better at creating that safe space, if you like, and building the team bond. And we put deliberate things into the initial startup for each team to facilitate that. But I think, yeah, it's been a fabulous way of working with teams to get them really thinking creatively and innovatively. It's been amazing.
It does sound like a great project and so successful as well, and great that you were recognised. So we'll move on to the next segment, being lacked. So the vast career that you've had and all the experiences, and you mentioned earlier on that it was a bit of a squiggly career before we started recording. So what would you change, if anything?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think looking back, I wish I'd got into learning more about Agile much, much earlier because I find it such a liberating way to work. And I remember going back, must be, well, many years ago. So it was when I worked at the law firm still. And I remember our head of development, application development, said, why don't we do this project? Why don't we use agile methodology for this project? And I remember at the time thinking, I don't know what on earth you're talking about. And then I just, carried on with what I was doing kind of thing. And I think everybody was the same at the time. Everybody thought, well, we don't know what we're talking about, Mark. And he was always coming up with these wild and wacky ideas. And I wish now that I'd taken the time to listen to him tell me more about agile methodology. I wish I'd made time to be more curious about it, because I think who knows, I might not have done anything with it at that time, but you just don't know. And I think in some ways, perhaps I've never actually done any formal qualification in agile.
Right.
Well, actually, that's not quite true. I did the Scaled Agile Framework certificate about a year or so ago. But before that, I didn't have any formal qualification. And I kind of wonder now whether I might have approached things differently if I didn't have if I'd had certificate, if I'd had qualification. But it all worked the way that I did it. My Cherry's version of Agile worked and works. So I think I might have done that a bit differently, but otherwise, I don't think there's much I would have wanted to do differently, or because I've generally felt like if something wasn't working or if I wasn't enjoying my work, or um, I would have I would have moved on. I mean, I did have a time where I did burn out when I was at work and was feeling extremely stressed and overwhelmed, and so in such a bad place mentally that I actually quit my job because I couldn't figure my way out of it. So I guess that's something I've learned over time, is to look after my own self, look after my own well-being and my inner resilience and strength, and actually set clearer boundaries for myself. But that's something that I learned because I got so burnt out. But I think otherwise, my career has always been interesting and fun, and I've loved what I do.
It sounds like you have a lot of the kind of hallmarks of most of the people I've been speaking to as well, having a sense of curiosity, a sense of fun, almost building a bit of a minimal lovable product within yourself in the kind of decisions that you're making as well, which is really interesting. And just to kind of touch on the burnout, I think, well, I've personally gone through it myself, and it is a lesson that you learn on the other side of it, unfortunately, unless you've got access to people and support and all the resources prior to it happening and you kind of falling off that cliff. But luckily we're able to pick ourselves back up. So to move into the longed for then, what would you like to do more of? What would add more value to Sherry's career going forward?
I would love to work with more organisations on setting up these big teams of multiple agile teams all running at the same time, working towards the same thing. I'd love to see more L&D teams really implementing agile ways of working and really using it to make sure that they're delivering, learning interventions that are going to have a real impact and make a proper difference. We see so much learning and development where people are just churning out content and more content and more content. And in fact, but not necessarily the content that the end user wants or needs. And I think that's one of the strengths of Agile. Like if you really become very user focused and user centric, then you can make sure you develop the content or the learning interventions that are needed. And that doesn't necessarily mean formal learning. It might be giving people opportunities to develop new skills or to develop more confidence in other ways, like, in secondments or shadowing or mentoring or coaching. It doesn't necessarily mean a learning course or a piece of content. So I'd love to have more opportunities to work with learning and development teams to really properly embrace Agile, because at Macmillan, we had some members of the learning and development team who really embraced it and were real evangelists and advocates, and then others who wanted to know more but were almost but didn't have the skills or didn't have the skills, and so didn't feel comfortable putting themselves out there to do it. So I'd love to be able to do that more. I think for me, it's just about what I love doing is bringing people together and helping them go from a team that's doing okay and is mediocre to a team that's like absolutely getting it right every single time and doing something amazing. Because when you've got a team that's really performing really well, it's not that you've got, you're bringing everybody up. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not about having one individual in that team doing all the work and dragging everyone along, but it's bringing everybody together, and then you get so much more from each individual as well. And being part of a high performing team really boosts your confidence and, gives you that realization that you can be more curious, you can have fun at work. It doesn't all have to be boring or drudgery. And even if you are having to do some of those more mundane, repetitive tasks that we all have in our work, if you know that the rest of the time you're going to be having fun and enjoying it and loving it, then that kind of makes up for it. So that's what I'd love to be able to do, more work with more charities and helping them develop their team so that more of us can have fun at work.
absolutely fabulous. I love that. And just to kind of touch on the L&D element that you mentioned, you've probably seen a bunch of my ranty ravey posts about it on LinkedIn. And I'm actually doing a session today talking about how we can leverage some of these activities within the ways of working within agile organizations to create better feedback loops so that we can build out the right solution, whether that be content, whether that be experiential learning, and the like, really. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that, and sharing that experience of the L&D team at Macmillan. We've introduced in my day job elements of agile ways of working, but yeah, we're building that out in an iterative fashion, as you would, being agile, and we're seeing some really interesting results. We delivered a session using TBR last week, so training from the back of the room, which is that kind of experiential learning, which I saw from an agile coach on LinkedIn. I think I saw a post, but I thought, oh, let's give that a go and see what the feedback is, and it was great. So yeah, I absolutely agree, and would champion that L&D teams need to kind of be a bit more experimental, and definitely start plugging into feedback loops that exist.
And it is that experimental approach, I think. I mean, that's one of the things you mentioned, the community of practice that I'd set up at Millionaire Agile Pirates. And one of the things I loved about that is I would, like you, see exercises or activities that people had mentioned or watch a TED talk and think, oh, let's try that. Let's give it a go. And sometimes I thought, no idea how this is going to work, because often some of these activities were designed for in person,
Yeah.
and Agile Pirates always met virtually. But every time they worked, they might not necessarily have had the end result that I thought we were going to see, but they always worked and we always had fun. And I think, with L&D, if you're using that agile way of working and you can experiment and iterate and get the feedback from the users in between, even if you're a sole practitioner working on your own, I still think you can introduce that agile methodology into the way that you work, even if it's just you, because it is about making sure you get that feedback, developing that first iteration of something, getting their feedback, making it different, showing what you've done so far without feeling the need to make it perfect before you show it off to your audience.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have one more question, because it's a podcast. It wouldn't be right if we didn't have an extra one. So, could you share a little bit of advice for anyone who has a similar career path or thinking of moving into the agile space, or any kind of advice that you'd like to give?
Oh, yes, that's a great question, Roxy. I think the first thing I would suggest to anyone is to sometimes you just have to be brave, take a deep breath and step out your comfort zone, even if, and at times, certainly in the past, I've thought, oh, I don't know if I can do this. But if you don't try, you're never going to know. And what's the absolute worst that can happen? So I think, be brave, step out of your comfort zone. And I think the other thing is to surround yourself with people who can be your cheerleaders, so that if things do go wrong, or if you're not happy with the way things are working out, but to have people around you who will cheer you on when things are going right, and oh, well done, fantastic, that's amazing, but also who can say, don't worry, it's okay, when things aren't going so well. And I think there's very much this thing where if everybody around you is putting themselves out of their comfort zone on a regular basis, it encourages you to do the same, because that becomes the norm. So it's normalizing being brave, normalizing being curious, normalizing putting yourself out of your comfort zone. I think making sure you've got a good support network around you is so important and make a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. Well, before I let you go, Sherry, can I get some contact details from you? Where can people find you in your work that you're doing at the minute?
Yeah, of course. Well, you'll find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me, because I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, as I know you are as well. Otherwise, my website, sherrybevan.co.uk. So those are the two best places to get in touch with me.
Oh, that is brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll make sure to get those on there. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. So thank you once again for your time, Sherry.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely to chat to you.
Sherry shared some great insights and that her driving force has been to be a present parent. Through her career journey with Agile, she has found ways to step out of her comfort zone and enable others to do the same. Sherry also outlined the importance of psychological safety to creative thinking and how Agile ways of working can generate learning opportunities through iteration, building minimal viable products, and working in non-hierarchical teams to develop high-performance culture. If you'd like to see more content from Agile People Ops, then check out their LinkedIn, website, and of course their YouTube. This was the Rapid Retro Podcast. I've been Roxy Allen, and I guess I'll catch you in the next one.